A race riot kicked off on the prison yard while I was on the weight pile, and I didn't know anything was going to happen. This is a story. I was in a satellite camp in West Carroll Detention Center. And in Louisiana prisons, there are satellite camps. I don't know if there's satellite camps in the rest of the states. I think, it probably varies from state to state, but I can say in Louisiana, the prison population and how many people they send to prison per capita is so large that the state prisons don't have enough room to house all the inmates. So they start sending them to what they call satellite camps. Satellite camps are usually parish prisons where the parishes have different prisons set up in their parish. And of course, they don't have enough people who live in the parish to house and fill up all the beds in the parish jails or the parish prisons. So they start taking state inmates from the bigger parishes like Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish, St. Tammany Parish, Shreveport, Bossier City, all those places, Monroe. And they'll put them in the smaller parishes throughout the state of Louisiana in the satellite camps. Satellite camps are often run by the parish themselves. They're not governed by the state. Even though you were sentenced to state time, the parish jail or the parish entity in the parish government, the sheriff himself runs the parish satellite camp. So you're under the jurisdiction of the state, but you're in the capacity and in the kingdom of the sheriff of that parish. And believe me, it's a kingdom. And listen, I know in different states it's different, but in Louisiana, the sheriffs who run the satellite camps will whip you down. They are literally rulers of their little kingdoms. And don't nobody, including congressional members, usually mess with these sheriffs in these little small towns. And so they run it however they run it. And I'm going to do a video on that soon about a place called Rayville. It's probably the most feared place in the state of Louisiana when it comes to what them people will do you when you get there. That's right. People rather go to a state prison. Most people rather, as opposed to end up in most of these satellite camps, they rather go to state prisons. They rather go to Hunt, DCI, Angola, as opposed to getting stuck in a satellite camp for the next 10 or 15 years, which has happened to inmates and which does happen to inmates. There are no programs in the satellite camps. None. You don't have AA, NA, yard time. The visits are often, sporadic. It's the sheriff and the warden of that jail who the sheriff puts in place. They run it the way they want to run it, and don't nobody telling people nothing. And often they are taking the state money because that's what happens. The state pays them per inmate per day, and they're feeding you whatever they think they want to feed you, as little as possible, as cheap as possible. And they have as very little programs as possible because they don't want to pay nobody to run no program. And so you don't have all the Toastmasters. You don't have hobby shops. You're stuck, and you don't even get yard time in some of them. The one where I'm going to tell you this race riot kicked off, there was yard time. But you don't get yard time in all the satellite camps, the parish prisons. Often you just sitting up in there all day and day out in a dorm with 100 people, 130 people, and it's just nonstop chaos. It's loud, loud, loud. Because the way it's designed, it's like an echo chamber. Everything bounces off the brick walls and the bunks. It's just nonstop. I'm going to give you an idea. This is no exaggeration. Pretend like somebody's playing cards, right? Or dominoes. Boom! Bow! Boom! Boom! All day long. And after a while, man, that nonstop noise at high decibels, it can start to play on your psyche, man. And it can get crazy, man. That's why nobody wants to be in these satellite camps, these parish prisons that are basically parish jails that don't have nothing to do positively for no inmate. Dudes, listen, Louisiana's laying people down. You get time in Louisiana, you will get laid down. It ain't nothing. It ain't nothing. We got the highest prison capita in the world. I think just recently, literally just recently, maybe Alabama and Mississippi One of them might have passed us up. But for decades, Louisiana had the #1 per capita incarceration rate in the world. In the world. That's why so many people from Louisiana, it's a smaller state. That's why so many people know people who've been to prison. And it's a small state, neighborhood to neighborhood. You could literally be living in an affluent neighborhood and be a couple blocks from the projects. And that's why people, they knew each other. And some dudes, you're like, dang, man, how that dude? But he grew up with head busters. Even though he was affluent, he hung out with head busters because he was shooting that dope. And so that's not uncommon here in Louisiana. It's normal. I just want to give you a rundown of visual representation of what the parish satellite camps are and what they look like. And, it's not a state prison. A satellite camp is not a state prison. In Louisiana, the state prisons are Hunt, DCI, WCI, which is now Rayburn 60 Correctional Institution, Angola, Cottonport, Allen, Wade. They used to have Fort Wade, but I think that's closed down. They used to have DeQuincy. I'm not sure if DeQuincy's closed down or not. It might be closed because they closed some of the state prisons down. And, these are the state prisons. And so you got to think throughout the state of Louisiana, even though Angola is the biggest prison in the entire country on how many people it can hold and house, and then you add all the other state prisons, the state of Louisiana for state inmates at state facilities, actual state-run facilities. And you got to think, Allen and Cottonport, even though they're state prisons, they're privately run. That's right. In Louisiana, some of the state prisons are run by private corporations. There's money in inmates. Inmates are cattle. You can make money by housing inmates and providing staff to supervise those inmates in corrections. And so some prisons like Allen Correctional Center in Cottonport and Winfield's another state prison. That's another one. All these prisons are private prisons where private corporations are paid by the state of Louisiana to run these state facilities. It's a state facility, but privately run, privately owned, privately operated. It's a business model. There is investors and investment strategies that go into these prisons so the investors can make money. That's right. They're making a rate of return off of physical bodies and off of people committing crimes in the state of Louisiana. That's why Louisiana has a high incarceration rate. And that's why Louisiana has strict sentencing guidelines. You will go to prison in Louisiana. Don't even get you. There's so many people who come down here for like Mardi Gras. They don't never go home. They get stuck in a prison. And believe me, there are stories online. You can hear people tell stories. They got stuck. And you do not want to get stuck in a place like Orleans Parish Prison for the next 2 or 3 years. Talk about a nightmare. That's what you're going to go through. You don't even know nobody from the state barely. You definitely going to have a hard time in Orleans Parish Prison because the way it works, them dudes are from, if you ain't from them dudes projects or you ain't from the Ninth Ward or you ain't from Uptown, it's going to be hard. You might even be from the state and you still going to have, them dudes stick with them dudes. And that's just the way it is. And so that's what happened on this weight pile. In this early morning day that this riot kicked off. So let me lay the picture out on how this riot kicked off and what exactly I was doing when this race riot kicked off. It's an early morning on a Saturday. And when I say early morning, at this particular satellite camp, which was one of the better satellite camps to be in because they gave all day yard call. That's right. They opened up the dorms to the yard and all the dorms could intermingle. There was four different yards, and each yard had 2 dorms. So there was a total of 8 dorms at this satellite camp, but it was all day outside. There were a little bit more programs than some of the worst ones that I wound up in. And so you had a little bit more to do. There was more church activity. And like I said, there was a lot of yard time. So you could spend a lot of time on the yard. Well, there was so much yard time that some of the dudes in the mornings, like on a Saturday, they'd just be sleeping in, sleep late, lose weight. After chow, dudes would go back to sleep. And chow was early. Chow was before the sun comes up. Dudes are walking to the dorm. Inmates are going to the chow hall, and chow is completely served up, and you fed up. The whole prison is fed up. by the time the sun is barely up, prison's fed up, child's over with. And some people on Saturdays, they don't get up. And so a lot of people are sleeping. So the yard is relatively empty in the very early AM. Some dudes will hit the weight pile right away and go back and take a nap and go to sleep. So it's early. I'm saying early, it's about 8 o'clock in the morning. And we on the weight pile. And I'm on the weight pile with a partner of mine that's from where I'm from. Partner of mine named Mike. And his name was, we call him Big Round. You know, he's a big dude, stocky dude. And the word round is basically what y'all might use in California as homie. That's what we say, round. You know, every state has different terminology. In Louisiana, you're going to hear a lot of rounds. You heard me, you heard me, you heard me, you know. You get a lot of that down here. Well, I'm on the yard. I'm with my Big Round. And we working out, you know. We on the weight pile, you know, doing our bench presses. You know, getting swole up, staying in shape. And I was in phenomenal shape at this point. Phenomenal. I'm like, I think around this time, I weigh around 220, 225 pounds, and I'm solid muscle. Ain't no body fat on me at this point in my life. And I'm nonstop working out. I'm on the weight pile. I'm with Big Round. We just talking. And the yard is strange when I look back at this day, because the yard was kind of quiet. You had dudes, and when I remember going back, replaying the day's events in my head and finally figuring out what happened. So, you know, in prison, you paying attention to everything around you. And this wasn't until after the riot kicks off, when I'm recollecting and I remember putting the pieces together, that there was these dudes, it was specifically the white dudes, kept coming in and out of the dorm. The weight pile was on one. There wasn't a weight pile on all 4 yards. The weight pile was on 1 yard. It was the yard toward the back of the prison. And it was right on the side of that dorm. Well, in that dorm, a lot of the white dudes kept walking in and out, in and out. And we watching them walk in and out and talking and everything. And I'm not talking to none of them. Big Round's not talking. He's a white dude, Big Round. And me and Big Round are working out. We in our conversation. We in our zone talking about whatever we were talking about, getting each other's reps in, you know, switching, spotting him. He's spotting me, getting our reps in. And then we on the weight pile, and there's like 4 or 5 other dudes on the weight pile too, black dudes. And they working out, we working out. And all of a sudden, you see the white dudes sporadically in little groups, and they start kind of getting a little bit quicker. They're moving a little bit quicker, and I'm watching them. And this is all after the riot kicks off that I put this together. I wasn't thinking this while we were working out. It wasn't until it was all after that me and Big Round talked, like, man, that was crazy. So the white dudes are coming in and out of the dorm, and next thing you know, they're about like, on this yard, just all on this 1 yard, because there's 4 different yards, and everybody in the yards could intermingle in this prison. And so everybody was really on this yard, and it wasn't a lot of people. Then it was kind of a lot of people. Next thing you know, there's like 30, 35 black dudes in little pockets all over the yard. And all of a sudden, man, right behind the weight pile, we on the weight pile, we working out. Boom, you look, and all of a sudden there's a fight, a one-on-one fight, black dude and a white dude. Boom, 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 boom. I knew the white dude, from Shreveport, somebody I associated with and talked to, and he's fighting a black dude. And they just fighting, boom, boom, boom. They get in a mix. It was a good little fight. And they fought for about 2 or 3 minutes, and they were in a mix with each other. They both stood their ground, and it was a good fight. And so they finished fighting, boom. And they walked off, and me and Big Round was like, that was crazy, man. With that kickoff, I said, I didn't see nothing. Next thing you know, I just said they were fighting. And Big Round's like, yeah, man, that was crazy. That was why I'm doing handling business. And I said, yeah, they handle their business, you know. And so we sitting there, we keep working out. Next thing you know, boom, another fight kicks off. Right on the side of the weight pile. It's another one of them white dudes from Shreveport fighting another black dude. And I don't know everybody, and I didn't know this dude. It was just a dude who was in the first fight that I personally knew and had conversation with. And so the other dude, the white dude and black dude who's fighting on the side, they get in a quick little fight. Next thing you know, 2 other black dudes jumping in, and they jumping the white dude. Boom, 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 boom. And so now everybody on the weight pile, we kind of looking at me and Big Round's like, what's going on, you know? Next thing you know, they break up. You know, it gets broke up. They get separated. And then all of a sudden, little pockets of 3, 4, 5 people fighting, 6 people, 10 people here. Pockets break out all over the yard. They fighting everywhere. One white dude who was behind the yard, he got punched and knocked out instantly. Dudes, and he was getting stomped on by the black dudes. So me and Big Round, we like, what's going on? And I looked at him, and he looks at me, and we're like, is it a race riot? And so it's all the white dudes fighting black dudes. And so me and him, they got the weights in this prison aren't chained down. Like I said, these satellite camps are wild. I grab like a 5-pound weight. He grabs like a 5-pound weight. We got our shirts off and we wrap the weights in the shirt and we get each other back to back. And the black dudes who were on the weight pile, those I was talking about, they kind of look at us. We look at them and we looking at everybody else and they just standing there too. And they were working out. Next thing you know, blacks and whites are fighting. All the blacks are fighting all the whites. But the 5 dudes, black dudes who were on the weight pile with us, they didn't get down. They wasn't moving. They were looking at us. We were looking at them. We were looking at everybody because they were just like me and the other white dude who I was working out with, Big Round. Me and Big Round are looking at these black dudes and these black dudes are looking at us. It took us a second to realize that this whole race riot didn't have nothing to do with New Orleans. We were from New Orleans. We white dudes from New Orleans. The other black dudes who were on the weight pile, those 5 other dudes, they were also from New Orleans. The fight involved country white boys against country black dudes. And so what happened is the city whites and the city blacks, they were not privy to what was going on. Apparently some beef kicked off between the country whites and the country blacks. And that's who was fighting on the yard. It was Shreveport. It was Shreveport whites fighting Shreveport blacks. And the white, it was a crazy fight, man. The whites were outnumbered probably about 4 to 5 to 1. But they were fighting. There was a couple of white dudes who stood their ground, man. They fought pretty good, but about 2 or 3 of them got knocked out and they were done. And dudes had pulled the shank out, man. Next thing you know, dude's like, he jugged me. You know what I mean? One of the white dudes, he got jugged, you know, and he's running and dudes running behind him with a blade. This ain't a prison where they got gun towers. It's a parish satellite camp. There are roaming officers and trucks who watch everything. It's the Wild Wild West. So by the time the guards came, a couple dudes was knocked out, man. One dude got stuck. And me and Big Round are looking like that was the craziest thing I ever seen. So now you might be asking, how come we didn't jump in to help the white dudes? Well, 1, we didn't know about nothing. And then 2, in Louisiana, it don't get down. Ain't no political stuff down here. You roll with your people, and that's just the way it is. We were cool with some of them dudes, but, you know, we didn't know them dudes, and them dudes didn't know us, you know, like that, you know. So they got in their fight. And if we would have jumped in, we would have jumped in, or them other city blacks would have jumped in. They didn't have nothing. We didn't know nothing. We went in the blind. So New Orleans did not get down. And that's the way it is in Louisiana. You got political structure in the feds. You got political structure on the West Coast. You have to get down when your race gets down. No, not here. Not in Louisiana. Not in the South. It don't work like that. And so we watched this race riot go off. We didn't know what was going on. And it went down, and there was no reason for us to get involved. Looking back, we didn't even know what was happening. We were in the blind. So they must have had some personal beef. You know, like I said, those white dudes from Shreveport with those black dudes from Shreveport, and they got in a fight. And at the end of it, it was all said and done. It was over. The guards came out there. They broke it all. Of course, they couldn't. It was like 50 people fighting, 50, 60 people fighting. They couldn't, because by this time, by the time the fight fully is in full swing, people are coming out the dorms. They seeing what's going on. And, you know, there was not enough police officers to put everybody in the hole. Some dudes got transferred for that. And that's just the way it is in prison, man, in the South. There is no structured cars in the South. It does not exist. People stick with people who they grew up with, and that's just the way it is. You could be a white dude and you grew up with them black dudes. That's who you probably gonna stick with them because you know them. You're from the same neighborhood. There ain't no organized cars in Louisiana, man. It ain't happening. It is the Wild Wild West. You're going to get crowded from a bunch of people from Baton Rouge. If you from New Orleans and they outnumber you, they going to get you. If you from New Orleans and you got beef with somebody from another part, then New Orleans is going to stick with New Orleans. And that's how they say it. When you white and you from the New Orleans area, they say you from the city. And so I would be considered from the city because I'm from the New Orleans area, lived in New Orleans. So that's who I'm going to roll with, New Orleans. That's who I'm going to identify with inside the prison, New Orleans. I know it's different everywhere, you know. So you can say what you want. You can share in the comments with, you know, how it would have went down in your state if you would have saw whites and blacks fighting. But like I said, it wasn't just us. The blacks from New Orleans did not get involved, and the whites from New Orleans didn't get involved. So that's the way it is. It might not make sense to some states, but that's the way it is in Louisiana, man. Share in the comments what you think, man. Would you have got involved with that fight to stick with your people? Now, if you're from the West Coast, you're probably going to say, yeah, but you ain't going to do that in Louisiana because it ain't going to go too good for you. It ain't going to matter. It just won't matter. And if you blacks, it ain't going to matter neither. And, you know, because in Louisiana, it just is different, man. It's just a whole different structure. There ain't no structure. There's zero structure. Anyway, give me a like and subscribe to the Pen and The Shank. I wanted to just shoot it from the chest today. And I thought about that race riot where I was on the yard, and I thought it would be good to share, man. Tell me some stuff that you'd like to hear. And thanks for watching, man. Give me a like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the channel out. And share this video.